From bar fights to getting embarrassed in front of the whole world, these are 10 times WWE wrestlers got into real fights, starting with arguably the most infamous crossover attempt in wrestling history. After walking out of WWE in 2014, CM Punk shocked the world by announcing he was pursuing a career in mixed martial arts. Punk signed with UFC and spent over 2 years training for his debut. In September 2016 at UFC 203, the former WWE champion finally stepped into the octagon to face Mickey Gall, and the fight was over almost as soon as it started. Within seconds, Punk was flat on his back. Gall immediately mounted him and started raining down punches to Punk's face. The Chicago native tried to defend himself, but it was painfully clear he was out of his depth. Gall wrapped Punk up in a rear naked choke, and just minutes into his MMA career, CM Punk was forced to tap out. The wrestling world had mixed reactions. Some respected Punk for having the guts to try something new. Others saw it as a reality check for a guy who constantly claimed he was the best. Even Stephanie McMahon took shots at him, mocking the loss during a WWE promo, but Punk's UFC run ultimately proved that being tough in a wrestling ring doesn't automatically translate to legitimate fighting. Sometimes ego writes checks the body can't cash. But while Punk's defeat happened in front of millions, let's talk about the time Randy Orton got into a real fight in a much more personal setting. Randy Orton's temper is legendary in wrestling circles. The Viper has had well-documented anger issues throughout his career, though in recent years he seemed to mellow out into a family man focused on his craft. But in early 2017, an incident at a gym reminded everyone that Orton's short fuse was still very much intact. According to reports, a fan approached Orton at the gym asking for a photo. Orton, who was mid-workout with headphones on, gave the guy a fist bump and pointed to his headphones, indicating he couldn't hear him and wasn't interested. But here's where things escalated. The fan walked away but decided to snap a picture of Orton from across the room anyway. Orton immediately spotted what happened and confronted the fan, getting right in his face. The exchange got heated fast, with Orton demanding the fan delete the photo and dropping multiple F-bombs in the process. Eventually, after the intense confrontation, the fan agreed to delete the picture, though he later admitted to his friends that he kept it anyway. Now, there's some debate about whether this was legitimate anger or if Orton was working a heel character. Either way, the incident serves as a reminder that celebrities deserve privacy, especially during personal time at the gym. But switching gears, let's talk about the one WWE superstar who didn't just dabble in MMA, he conquered it. Brock Lesnar left WWE in 2004 and signed with UFC in 2008, bringing instant credibility due to his NCAA wrestling background. Unlike CM Punk, who had zero combat sports experience, Lesnar was a legitimate athlete with the perfect skill set for MMA. His UFC debut came against former heavyweight champion Frank Mir, and despite losing by submission, Lesnar showed he belonged in the octagon. Just 4 fights into his UFC career, Lesnar captured the UFC Heavyweight Championship by defeating Randy Couture in 2008. Lesnar successfully defended his title multiple times, but Lesnar's UFC run wasn't without setbacks. He dealt with serious health issues, including diverticulitis, and he lost his title to Cain Velasquez in 2010 and suffered a defeat to Alistair Overeem in 2011 before retiring from MMA. Lesnar returned to WWE in 2012 and later made a one-off UFC return in 2016, defeating Mark Hunt before the result was overturned due to a failed drug test. Today, Lesnar's legacy in both WWE and UFC remains untouchable, cementing his status as one of the most legit tough guys to ever step foot in a wrestling ring. But moving on, let's talk about the time when a wrestler got into a real fight that landed him in hot waters with the Kuwaiti government. Back in the 1990s, discussing whether wrestling was real or fake was considered disrespectful. Wrestlers protected the business at all costs, and calling it fake to their face was asking for trouble. In April 1997, Vader and The Undertaker traveled to Kuwait to promote the WWF's upcoming tour of the Middle East. They appeared as guests on a morning talk show called Good Morning Kuwait. But what should have been a simple promotional appearance turned into an international incident. During the interview, the host made a comment about how people in Kuwait believed wrestling was fake and that the wrestlers were just acting. The Undertaker, ever the professional, gave a diplomatic response about the athleticism and entertainment value of what they do. But when the host didn't give Vader a chance to respond and moved on, that's when things got ugly. Vader stated that he found the question and remarks insulting to what he does for a living. Then, in front of cameras broadcasting live across Kuwait, Vader flipped the interview table and grabbed the host by his tie. The terrified host tried to defend himself as Vader continued his aggressive tirade, but the damage was done. Vader was arrested and charged with assault and use of obscene language. But here's the twist. His arrest happened at the beginning of a major religious holiday, meaning Kuwaiti courts were closed. Vader ended up trapped in Kuwait for 2 weeks, unable to leave the country while facing serious criminal charges in a foreign nation. Eventually, the situation was resolved, but Vader's Middle East incident became one of wrestling's most notorious international controversies. However, while Vader's fight was fueled by disrespect, let's talk about a WWE star who channeled his aggression into a legitimate combat sports career. Jack Swagger, or Jake Hager as he's known outside WWE, took a different approach than most wrestlers who dabble in MMA. After leaving WWE in 2017, the former World Heavyweight Champion decided to test himself in Bellator MMA. Hager's MMA debut came in January 2019 against J.W. Kaiser. The All-American American looked surprisingly comfortable in the cage, utilizing his wrestling background to control the fight. But the real fireworks came before his second fight. At the weigh-in, Hager's opponent T.J. Jones decided to talk trash and disrespect the former World Heavyweight Champion. When fight night arrived, Hager made Jones pay for running his mouth. Once again, Hager secured a submission victory, but this time he didn't let go right away. The referee had to physically pull Hager off Jones, sending a clear message that disrespect wouldn't be tolerated. Hager's third fight was ruled a no contest, with many accusing him of intentional fouls. He would have one more fight in 2020 before retiring from MMA in 2023. Unlike CM Punk's embarrassing UFC run, Hager proved that some wrestlers can actually hang with trained fighters. But while Hager fought trained professionals, let's talk about a WWE giant who faced off against a specialist in a completely different sport. Braun Strowman built his WWE reputation on being an unstoppable force of nature. But in 2021, Strowman found himself in a competition that would test whether all that WWE strength was legitimate or just smoke and mirrors. Strowman entered an arm wrestling contest with Devin Larratt, the best arm wrestler in North America and one of the most decorated competitors in the sport's history. Larratt easily defeated Strowman, and despite all of Braun's size and power, Larratt won the match convincingly. But here's where things got uncomfortable. Larratt taunted Strowman after the loss, and tempers started flaring between both camps. The incident serves as a reminder that professional wrestling strength and real competitive strength are two very different things. Speaking of WWE wrestlers getting humbled in real competition, let's talk about the most disastrous experiment in WWE history. In 1998, WWE made one of the dumbest decisions in company history. Someone in management thought it would be a brilliant idea to have their trained professional wrestlers compete in legitimate boxing matches. They called it the Brawl for All, and it was a disaster from start to finish. The concept was simple. 16 WWE wrestlers would compete in an unscripted boxing tournament. Fighters wore boxing gloves, and the matches were entirely real with no predetermined outcomes. On paper, it might have sounded like an interesting experiment. In reality, it was chaos that resulted in injuries, ruined careers, and exposed the business in the worst possible way. When fights are scripted, you can protect your top stars and build whoever you want. But in a real fight, you can't control who wins and loses. WWE officials allegedly wanted to use the tournament to give wrestler Steve Williams a massive push by having him win the whole thing. But in a surprise plot twist, Williams lost in the second round to Bart Gunn, a mid-card wrestler nobody expected to do anything significant. By the end of the Brawl for All, Bart Gunn had won the entire tournament, and WWE management was absolutely furious. WWE's response to Gunn's victory was petty and vindictive. After winning the tournament, Gunn was sent home and kept off television for months. Then WWE concocted the perfect punishment and had the winner of the Brawl for All face professional boxer Butterbean at WrestleMania 15. Butterbean, an actual professional boxer, destroyed Bart Gunn in just 35 seconds. Shortly after his embarrassing loss, WWE fired Bart Gunn. His career in mainstream wrestling was effectively over, and by 2006 he had retired from wrestling entirely. But while the Brawl for All was an official WWE production, let's talk about an incident that happened behind the scenes during one of their biggest events. SummerSlam 2013 is remembered as one of the best SummerSlam events of all time. Daniel Bryan's emotional victory, CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar, and multiple title changes made it a must-watch show. But there's an incident that occurred that weekend that often gets overlooked. The incident involved Alberto Del Rio, who was the World Heavyweight Champion at the time, and Drew McIntyre, who was working as a member of the 3MB comedy faction. Both men found themselves at an Irish bar in Los Angeles during SummerSlam weekend, and according to reports, Del Rio got into a verbal confrontation with someone at the bar. The situation quickly escalated, and before anyone knew what was happening, the verbal argument turned physical. What started as a one-on-one confrontation suddenly became a group situation with multiple people joining in to attack Del Rio. But this is where Drew McIntyre became an unexpected hero. The Scottish Warrior jumped into the brawl to help his fellow WWE superstar, fighting off multiple attackers to protect Del Rio. Despite being outnumbered, McIntyre and Del Rio managed to fend off the group and escape without serious injury. The incident was quietly swept under the rug, but it remains one of those interesting behind-the-scenes stories that wrestling fans love to discuss. McIntyre's actions that night also reportedly earned him respect backstage, showing he was willing to have his fellow wrestlers' backs when things got real. But while Del Rio and McIntyre faced random bar patrons, let's talk about a WWE star who stepped into a legit boxing ring in front of millions. John Morrison has always been one of WWE's most athletic performers. From his parkour skills to his innovative offense, Morrison made a career out of doing things other wrestlers couldn't physically accomplish. In 2023, Morrison decided to find out if his skills were real by competing at Creator Clash 2. Creator Clash was a charity boxing event featuring internet personalities, YouTubers, and content creators squaring off in boxing matches. Morrison's opponent was Harley Morenstein, better known as the face of the YouTube channel Epic Mealtime. When the opening bell rang, Morrison came out aggressively, immediately showcasing his superior athleticism and conditioning. The former WWE Intercontinental Champion continued to press his advantage, landing combinations and showing that his striking ability wasn't just for show. Morrison's victory proved that while professional wrestling is scripted, the athletic ability required to perform at that level is very real. Morrison's success came from understanding his limitations and competing in an appropriate environment. He didn't try to fight trained MMA fighters or professional boxers. He entered a celebrity boxing event where his athletic background gave him an unfair advantage, and he delivered. Sometimes knowing your lane is the smartest move you can make. But speaking of people who didn't know their lane, let's talk about two wrestlers whose real fight happened in the most unexpected location possible. Enzo Amore is one of the most polarizing figures in modern wrestling history. Some fans loved his charisma and mic skills, while others found him obnoxious and overrated. Within the wrestling industry itself, opinions on Enzo were even more divided, with numerous wrestlers publicly stating they couldn't stand working with him. One of those wrestlers was Joey Janella, and their mutual dislike led to one of the strangest wrestler confrontations in recent memory. In the summer of 2019, at a Blink-182 concert, Enzo and Janella's beef came to a head. According to both men, who told their sides of the story through Twitter, Janella approached Enzo at the concert and introduced himself. What happened next depends on whose version you believe. Enzo claimed that he initially thought Janella was a fan trying to get a photo. The moment he realized it was actually Janella, Enzo said he slapped him and walked toward him with his hands up, while Janella backed away and told people to film the encounter. Janella's version painted a different picture entirely. He claimed he politely introduced himself and things immediately escalated into a fistfight right there at the Blink-182 show. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, as it usually does with these situations. But while Enzo and Janella's fight was between two clowns, let's talk about a moment when an amateur almost ended a WWE legend's career. In the early 2000s, WWE created a reality show called Tough Enough, where ordinary people competed for WWE contracts. During one episode, Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle came to the ring and issued an open challenge to the Tough Enough contestants for an amateur wrestling match. This seemed like a safe bet for WWE, as nobody expected any of the Tough Enough rookies to give him trouble. Enter Daniel Puder, an MMA fighter who had decided to try out for Tough Enough. When Angle issued his challenge, Puder stepped up, and what happened next made everyone in WWE extremely uncomfortable. The match started normally, with Angle taking Puder down using his superior wrestling technique. But then Puder transitioned into a Kimura lock and was seconds away from breaking Kurt Angle's arm. In a real MMA fight, Angle would have been forced to tap out or suffer a broken arm. But this was WWE television, and tapping out would have destroyed Angle's credibility. So Angle refused to tap even as Puder cranked on the submission hold. A quick-thinking referee realized what was happening and counted Puder's shoulders, even though they weren't actually on the mat. Angle was visibly furious afterward, and the backstage reaction was even worse. Puder had just embarrassed one of WWE's top stars on television, and the locker room was not happy about it. WWE's revenge came a few months later at the 2005 Royal Rumble. Puder was entered into the match alongside several veteran wrestlers who had been waiting for their chance to teach the rookie a lesson. When Puder entered the ring, wrestlers like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and Hardcore Holly absolutely brutalized him with stiff chops and strikes before eliminating him from the match. Puder was soon released from WWE, and he learned that having the ability to win a real fight doesn't matter if you make enemies with everyone in the process. Luckily for Puder, he was facing Kurt Angle instead of Perk Angle. Otherwise, it would have been a completely different story. Speaking of Perk Angle, check out this video next about the most dangerous versions of WWE wrestlers.